Well, a very good afternoon to you, or good morning, or hello to you, wherever you might be listening to our coaching cafe today. My name is Natalie Ashdaf from the Open Door Coaching Group. It is great to welcome you to this coaching cafe, where we're talking about best practice in building a coaching culture and looking at a very great case study around broadening the reach of coaching. And I am joined by the fabulous Ian Scott today on the line. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you, Natalie.
So before we begin, as always, let me acknowledge the traditional owners and the custodians on the lands on which we're all meeting today and their continuing connection to the land and waters and communities of Australia and around the world, our international communities, wherever you might be joining us today. We pay our respects to them and to elders past, present and emerging, and elders from Indigenous communities from around the world. So I'm very excited about our conversation today. We're going to be continuing our discussion around coaching culture and talking about best practice. And we've had a lot of feedback to say, let's bring on the practitioners who are implementing coaching into their organizations. And that's where I thought I would give Ian a call and ask him to come and join us, because we're thinking about how do we, the broadening scope of coaching into workplaces and the reach that individuals can have, and also the reach throughout organizations. And so we'll be talking about that today. For those of you that are new to the Coaching Cafe, welcome. We are all about creating a community, sharing our learned experiences, having thought-provoking conversations. And as always, if you are one of our regulars, welcome back. We do enjoy coming together at this time every Friday. And for those listening to us on our podcast, welcome back. It's great to have you join us as well. If you are here because you'd like to collect your CCEUs, we will, of course, have those available at the end of our session for anyone that's collecting their ICF professional development points. So with that in mind, let me turn my screen off, because we don't need to share the screen. There it is. So I can just have yourself and me, Ian. And so let me just do a quick introduction of our dear colleague, Ian Scott, an experienced leader at all different command levels of the Royal Australian Air Force. With 36 years of experience across roles in operations, strategy analysis, development, policy implementation, command of a number of different squadrons throughout your career. But since then, you've also, and whilst you've been having that wonderful career, you've become an accomplished facilitator, workplace and business coach, licensed mental health first aid practitioner, and you've developed leadership coaching to commanders in the Air Force, as well as executives and managers. The CV goes on, really, Ian, but also we point out your extensive work both locally and globally with Rotary International. So it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you back. We met many years ago now, Ian, when you did your Cert 4 course at Amberley with Air Force, and it's just been great to see how you've implemented coaching in all the different facets of your life, both professionally and personally. So thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Natalie. And when you live long enough, your CV becomes very impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are talking with one of the most experienced leaders in Air Force, and it's a pleasure to have you share your time with us. So if I might just quickly get into the conversation, Ian, because there's lots that I want to talk to you about and so much that you can always share. And by the way, for those of you that are interested, Ian has recorded coaching cafes with us in the past, and there's a couple of coaching cafes on our blog actually around coaching upwards. So we've talked about coaching within a military environment and whether that coaching upwards, downwards and sideways is actually possible. And you gave us 5 principles for coaching upwards. So we won't talk about that today, but people can pick it up on our blog. So thank you for joining us once again. And we've been talking about the importance of coaching. We've been talking about the importance of the Leader as Coach programs as enabling coaching within organisations and creating that force multiplier effect. Force multiplier effect was a term that I first learned throughout my work with Air Force. So Ian, I wonder if I might be able to throw to you, and if you could perhaps share with people that are listening today about how coaching grew at Air Force from those early programs and your involvement in implementing Coaching 101s.
Yeah, sure thing, sure thing. So yeah, it was 2015 when you ran the first course for us, and that coaching in Air Force grew out from the center, from the headquarters, actually, which, you look at it and go, oh, this is one of those top-down things. We're being directed to do this. But Air Force Adaptive Culture, who are the people charged with looking at developing agility and adapting Air Force to contemporary standards to get best practice into Air Force, they were the ones who first would have approached you and talked about coaching and getting it rolled out in Air Force. And the aim was to have a ripple effect, so that rather than it actually come from above, is to not just drop one stone and let it ripple, but put a whole bunch of stones out into the water and have a whole bunch of ripples going out all at once, so that it sort of built up. And it worked. We basically started to seed Air Force with coaches, and as those coaches were working with people and helping them to develop their themselves and get the best out of themselves, more people became interested in it and wanted to know. So after a little while, it was then time to tackle the leadership, because everything takes resources, and unless the leadership was on board, it wouldn't work. And we then did that. We tackled the leadership, so the example was set. I'm guessing in a lot of organizations that tackling is done by HR or maybe a very smart CEO. But in Air Force, it helped that I was actually already a senior guy. I was in the reserve by then, and I was able to talk to the leadership very frankly, very openly, and to encourage them to take it up. And they did. But of course, one of the things they said was, well, not everybody needs to do this coaching course. Not everybody needs to be a coach. We don't have resources for that. And we developed the Coaching 101. So it was just an introductory course to coaching, but we basically taught this, there's basically coming up twice here, the basic skills: listening, effective questioning, putting aside judgment, reframing, all of those basic skills. And it was very effective to roll that out just to everybody. So this is not a rank-based issue. It's not a positional-based issue. It was for everybody. It was very effective, and the appetite was there. So our ripples really worked. We also found, Natalie, that good leaders, and that's at all levels, were already putting into practice a lot of these techniques. They knew instinctively maybe that that's what was required. So they built, say, look at the technician level, they would build ideas like before they go to do anything, they would plan it. They would get all the ideas from all of the people on the team and map out how they would approach a task, just an aircraft maintenance task, for example. Then they would brief it, and they would make sure that everybody knew exactly what they were going to do, and that there was no crossover or gaps in the knowledge. And of course, when you're working on aircraft, you can't afford to have gaps. Then they would follow the plan, adapting as needed, and then they'd review what they did. So we found that people were doing this anyway, and the coaching approach actually just reinforced it for them. And they said, well, this works, and this coaching stuff can be applied in the office. It can be applied in the barracks. It can be applied in our social life. So they'd actually learnt from it already. But of course, at the same time, busy leaders had already built rigidity into their processes. So we had to unpick a lot of that. Now, that took a while, and I'm not saying we're there yet. And of course, I'm no longer in the reserve, so I'm not allowed to speak for it. So we rolled it out to more than half the Air Force. In fact, about 60% of the Air Force had done the coaching, or the Coaching 101. So it's a fabulous success story. And my last gig on that was coaching for commanders who were coming into command or early on in their command, so they could develop what they were going to do. They sort of planned it out before they got on the treadmill. And that was a really, really satisfying thing for me, doing that level of executive coaching.
Thank you. It's such a great overview, and I'm reflecting back to those early days of Air
Mm,
Force. You know, when we walk on base with a vision and goal and plans for what's possible. And then, yes, I think at the last count that I heard, there's over 9,000 people have actually been through the
mm,
Coaching 101, and that was a while ago. So, and I know it's continued to roll out. I think the other thing that was so important, you mentioned around, it wasn't top down, it was seeding the ripples, and the criteria for coming on the program actually wasn't about rank. It wasn't about how many people you had under you in terms of direct reports. The expression of interest was, and still
mm.
is, are you keen to develop yourself and develop others?
Yeah.
Are you passionate about implementing coaching, and can you go back into your workforce and be a champion and implement coaching? So it wasn't that top down, tap you on the shoulder, you must come to a program. It was actually encouraging people who were already
Mm.
predisposed to wanting to grow themselves and others. And I think that was one of the success stories, or part of the success story as well.
Definitely. It didn't hurt to have a tame Air Commodore in the fold though.
Absolutely. It did not hurt to have a couple of those people like yourself that also, pointed to a couple of people and said, I think it'd be worthwhile you coming along as well, for sure, for sure. But it is a good point, actually, because I was thinking that coaching might be seen to be going almost against the military mindset, but in actual fact, your experience was quite different.
Mm.
Could you share your thoughts around that? We know that you can't do coaching all the time in every situation, but
Yeah.
what are your thoughts around that, Anne?
Yeah. So the archetypal military mindset in popular understanding is you've got your orders, just do it. And
Mm,
as you say, that has a place in some situations, quite a few, I suppose. And indeed, it has it in other organizations as well. But it doesn't help people deal with change and ambiguity. That's the problem.
mm,
In today's world, you have to manage change and ambiguity, and it's not possible. So in the military for quite some time, we've had this notion called mission command, and it's adaptable to any business, any endeavor. Essentially, you know what the mission is. So you get a team together, you make sure they clearly understand the mission, you set boundaries on it to the left and the right, so that they know they can't cross those boundaries. You make sure they've got the training, you make sure they've got the resources, including information, and it's underpinned by the values of the organization so that they don't cross the values line as well. And then whenever circumstances change, the leader of that mission will adapt, and knowing that they're adapting within the overall strategy. So to do that, you've got to encourage and develop critical thinking, risk appetite, innovation, a whole bunch of that. And a coaching approach really has enhanced this for Air Force, for the military in total. You are encouraging other people to realize their potential, to develop themselves, to be able to set objectives, to be able to solve problems, and in a way that's non-judgmental. I think that's really important, because that means it's nurturing as you develop that in people. The alternative is, you'd imagine somebody off on a mission, they're always phoning back for direction every time something changes. And when I had my squadron, I had aircraft all over the world doing different things. It was a transport squadron. If they were phoning me every 5 minutes I'd never sleep. I would be always on the phone.
mm,
Mission command enables commanders to get on with the other business they have. And this applies in the office or the non-mission environment as well. And perhaps it's the office that's more insidious, where it takes a leader's taken over by the need to be constantly solving problems, constantly answering questions from their teams, and running around doing someone else's work. They're basically doing the work of those people let's use the term below them, instead of looking up at the big picture, thinking about the things they need to do, strategizing, seeking and providing resources, developing their people, all those kind of things. So a coaching approach takes away the leader always problem solving. It takes away their followers becoming learned helpless, if you like, and it grows the team, gets the best answers, because, you know, if you don't draw on the full diversity and experience of the team, you're going to end up with a very limited scope of solutions to all your problems. So bringing the sort of mission command mentality into the office, into the headquarters, or into any organization, and focusing on developing the best out of your people is and has led to much better outcomes in Air Force and to a lesser extent Army and Navy, because they're maybe different focuses, but it's definitely there as well.
Yeah, and I'm reminded of the strategy documents as well that I was privileged to read, and they're publicly available information around fifth generation Air Force. And what you're suggesting also is that Air Force needed fifth generation technology, aircraft, for example, but they also needed people with new thinking, and that's where the coaching came into it as well. So we need our people to grow, develop, adapt, overcome. And so the coaching was specifically linked through to the people vector and the workforce strategy as well, around how people needed to grow and develop.
Absolutely, yeah. It just goes to, if you really value your people, and that's what we all keep saying, you know, human resources are our best resource. People are our best asset. Well, you have to invest in them, and that way you get the best out of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ian, I wanted to talk to you also because I think you're, incredibly unique in the way that you've been a leader within Air Force, but you're also at the same time a leader within a very senior leader within Rotary International at a global level. So you've managed to combine both parts of your life, I suppose, your not-for-profit, your community service over many, many years. And you saw the value of coaching in your not-for-profit work with Rotary International. Could you tell us more about that?
Well, when I first got into Rotary, I was still in the Air Force, and a little story about myself, when I became a president of my Rotary Club, I suddenly realized people weren't doing everything I asked them to do. And I thought, hang on, in Air
Command
Force,
and
I
control.
ask them and they do it. I thought they did it because I was a lovely guy, but I think they were doing it because they were paid and I was senior. No, leading volunteers is a different ball game, and anything other than a coaching approach is going to run foul. So with volunteers, you have to ask them to join a team in the first place. You have to ask them to step onto a project or to a task or whatever it is. And the benefit they get from that, apart from the, I guess, the altruistic feeling of doing good stuff for communities locally and globally, is they get to use their skills and they get to put themselves into a project. So that's the only benefit they're getting, and the only payment they get is thank you and celebrating success. It's a very different ballgame. If you do get a team together and then you proceed to micromanage them and question every decision and every action they've done, or do everything yourself as a leader in their place, then you get that similar learned helplessness that we talked about earlier. But worse than that, the volunteers feel that they're being watched and that their contribution is undervalued. So they won't be inclined to be proactive, and they'll just lose engagement with the project or activity. So there's no transactional aspect to leading volunteers. So it's like, you give me your work skills or your time for free, and then I've got nothing to give you. All I can do is thank you. So leaders need to be more transformational in Rotary to encourage, to inspire, and to motivate. So the coaching approach is definitely warranted. Developing people, making them feel empowering them, not just feel empowered, empowering them, developing them as leaders, letting them get on with the job, asking them what they need to do things. The coaching approach is definitely the way to deal with volunteers, and it keeps them engaged. It's very important in a modern contemporary Rotary. We grew from an organization where everybody was in business and they could just get on and do things, and unfortunately most of the time their secretaries would do all of the work. That doesn't work anymore. We're contemporary, we're out in a contemporary world, and so we have to have contemporary leadership and management. And the coaching approach is definitely one of those where leading volunteers, it's about the only way to go. And I would say that a coaching approach is servant leadership. And I firmly believe that servant leadership is the gold standard for this age, where we're realizing how important people are and how it's just as important to develop your people as it is to get the job done. Sure, the job needs to be done, but you've got to bring people along with you, and coaching approach definitely does that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I was reflecting also in preparing for our conversation that, and my community service as through life saving, that you have Rotary similar. There's jobs to be done, but sometimes there's job descriptions and like, but in a normal workplace, there's job descriptions and you appoint a person because you know their capabilities and you appoint them to the job and they do the job. But when it comes to volunteers like Rotary International or Surf Life Saving that I'm involved in, people have this wealth of knowledge and experience that you have that they could bring to all sorts of different facets of the job and of service. And it truly is our role as leaders to bring out the best in them.
Absolutely.
Because they have this professional life or their life experiences. And unless we're coaching, unless we're trying to find out what can they bring, how can they contribute, what decision-making abilities do they have, there's almost like an enormous untapped potential. So that's where our it's incumbent upon us to try to bring out the best in our volunteers.
Yeah, and I think if any organization needs to embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's volunteer organizations, and all organizations should definitely. But we are trying to get for free people's work, people's ideas, and solutions to problems. And to really include people, it takes a coaching approach, and I'm sold on that in Rotary. It doesn't mean that I can run around and get everybody to take up a coaching 101 or anything else, but I'm certainly, where I'm able, pushing soft skills like mentoring, like coaching in Rotary, so that we can get the best organization we can to do all that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. On an international level and international scale as well, on a global scale. And you often say to me that you're getting everyone just to grow everything, grow.
Yeah,
so meetings at Rotary now have turned into grow conversations. And it's just there for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've always admired, Ian, your strong desire to continue to learn and to grow. And we know over the last couple of years, you've also been extending your skills into mental health first aid training. We could see the logo on the back there. Yeah. And you've done an enormous amount of mental health first aid training, delivering those skills as well to Air Force and the broader community. So you were talking to me at one point around a link between mental health first aid training and coaching. So I'd be keen to hear your thoughts about how now you've extended your work into mental health first aid and where the coaching comes into it.
Yeah, sure. And I'll be quick. I'm cognizant of time. I didn't know I could talk so much. But
I'm enjoying the conversation.
So it's a mantra in coaching, when we're coaching, that we would need to know when our coachee is in need of some other professional support. And the subtext for me was when they need counselling or some other kind of support. And so we're told not to cross the line. We're coaches. Don't get into the counselling. Don't get into other areas of support. But if you see it, talk to your coachee and say, look, I reckon that you would benefit from having blah, blah. What do you reckon? Now, where was that line? And the line that bothered me most was mental health well-being. So I looked at a lot of different ways to build skills that our coaches could have in Air Force, that they knew where the line was. And the gold standard again for me was mental health first aid, because it gives you the knowledge, the skills, the confidence to support somebody who's developing a mental health issue or a worsening of a mental health issue or is in crisis. So this is a step beyond, are you okay? This is confidence and knowledge to help somebody, to support them. And once I looked at that, I realized we needed to do something about it in defense in toto. So that's another whole story about defense, but I managed to reinvigorate the mental health first aid courses in defense, which just at the right time, because defense had released their mental health wellbeing strategy. And I just, the skills you have as a coach are amplified in mental health first aid, how to be non-judgmental, how to find out that what's going on with a person is you ask questions and then you listen. And the more you listen, the more you find out, the more you're able to support the person and connect them with the right sort of help they need. So the synergy between coaching and mental health first aid was there for me. I could go on and on about mental health first aid and how it's even so rewarding just for the person themselves to do the training. They find that their life changes as well, even if they don't need any support. It just sort of, I don't know how to express this. It gives you self-awareness of your own mental health and well-being and encourages you to go and do something about it. So just doing the training, it helps you as well as helps potentially help other people. But the skill sets are so similar to coaching that I just couldn't believe it. So of course, now I've got a mental health first aid project in defense, in Rotary, where we deliver it to community groups and volunteers and family members at cost, or if we can manage to wangle a grant for free. So people who aren't in commercial organisations and couldn't afford to pay that, we can get it we're doing it for free. So we're meeting a need at another level, I guess you would say. So for me, they've been very, very complementary, and the whole journey from 2015 to here has just been amazing. I've really enjoyed it.
And I think about you creating ripple effects throughout Air Force with the different forms of coaching you're doing and the huge number of coaching 101 programs that you've delivered. And then I think about the ripple effect you're creating in mental health first aid awareness and in mental health first aid training. And I think it's, it just leaves me to say thank you, and thank you for your service, Ian, and thank you for sharing your knowledge with us, because I think it's such a wonderful example of how one person can create a significant ripple effect across different aspects of your life. So I know we're right on time, and I know that we could talk for a long time, a lot longer. But yeah, I want to say thank you on behalf of everyone for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge, and to show people what's actually possible.
No worries. Thank you for having me on. And I hope there are a few little lessons that people could pluck out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we'll be here for a couple more minutes. So if anyone would like to ask questions, we can. For now, I will pause the recording. And for those of you that are after your CCUs, I'll put them up as well. So bear with me for a moment while I do that.